Greetings. This is the one you've known as Jesus the Christ. This is part 2 of chapter 5 of my book, Awakening Love. When you're in touch with your divine self, any moment has the potential to be fun, including working out and things that generally wouldn't be considered fun. The joy of being in the present moment is something most people have to discover for themselves by being present long enough. Everyone has brief moments of being present, but few live in this state of consciousness or even realize this is possible or how to make this possible. The fun of being in the present moment is more like contentment, completeness, joy, peace, awe, wonder, delight, and a love for life. It's a sense of expansion, wholeness, connectedness, and gratitude for the gift of existence and all that entails. What more could you ask for? Being fully in the present moment has a feeling of richness and satisfaction that is missing in the egoic state of consciousness. The egoic state is like eating fast food. No matter how much you eat, you still don't feel really good or satisfied. That's because your soul can only be fed in the here and now. Only love satisfies, and that is as it's meant to be. That's how life shows you what is true, important, and of value. Being present is not a mystical experience or difficult to attain. Being present is a very ordinary and simple state, one you experience throughout your day whenever you aren't lost in thought. However, most people don't think much of this state when they do experience it, because they don't stay in it long enough to taste it. Tasting is a good metaphor for this. If you take a bite of the most delicious dessert and swallow it right away, you miss the full experience of it. Likewise, if you dip into the present moment only briefly, you miss the full experience of it. You may think you experienced it, but you didn't. You only dipped your toe in, and that isn't the same as swimming in the ocean, to use another metaphor. The problem is that if you don't know what you're missing by being lost in thought, you won't choose to be present. You won't choose against the default. You need to experience the beauty, contentment, and joy of the present moment long enough to want to stay there. This is why meditation and other spiritual practices that teach you to be present are so necessary. They show you that another state of consciousness is possible, and they teach you how to shift into that state and stay there. With a practice of meditation, you'll discover what you're missing by not being present, and begin to want that more than your thoughts. In this way, attachment to the voice in your head is loosened. A practice of meditation trains you to be in the present moment longer and longer. Eventually, you won't want to return to the old way of being lost in thoughts about me, myself, and I. It feels so good to lose the I. When you do, you discover that you never needed this I to live your life. You see that it's a pretend self. All along, your true self has been who you really are, but it allowed you to pretend that you were a fearful, limited self. Losing your sense of I, the false self, and all its stories, fears, and desires is the goal of the spiritual path. What you gain when you lose the false self is your true self and its peace, joy, and love. It's a good trade-off. This shift from thinking of yourself as the false self to knowing yourself as the true self and living as that is called awakening. You awaken out of the ego into the realization of who you essentially are. Then you can begin to live more as I did. This is a shift from living in your head to living in the present moment, from living in a made-up reality to living in reality. And reality is good. It is of God, of love, and so are you. Love the Lord your God with all your heart and with all your soul and with all your mind means love love. Love the love that is within you. Love the goodness, the godness that is within you. To love God means to honor love and goodness and follow love and goodness. When you love something with all your heart and all your soul and all your mind, you give it your attention, you're devoted to it, and you put it above all else. You worship it, you follow it. Worship love, follow love. There is no God in the sky that you should worship. That would be a false idol. Many today are too sophisticated and rational to believe that God is a human-like being sitting on a throne in the sky. And if those who do believe this weren't threatened by the fear of hell into believing this, they surely wouldn't believe this either. Love God doesn't mean worship your idea of God. It means put love above all else in all you say and do, since God is love. If you do this, you'll be happy, and you'll fulfill all the commandments. That is why this is the first and greatest of all commandments. Your relationship with God is the primary relationship. If you are in right relationship to God, to love, then you'll be in right relationship with all of life. Love is the first and greatest commandment. Honor love above all else. This is impossible from the egoic state of consciousness. That's why you must find your way back to love from this fearful and illegitimate state. The egoic state of consciousness is illegitimate. It is not in accordance with divine law. It is outside of truth. Your journey as a spiritual being is to find your way back to love from this state that is divorced from love. The egoic state of consciousness is a state of being lost, in the same way that the prodigal son, who was caught up in grasping and cravings of the ego, was lost. Like the prodigal son's adventure, your spiritual journey on earth is a story of redemption. God, who incarnates as you, loses himself, herself, in matter, in the egoic state of consciousness, only to return to his, her original state of love, all the wiser. God incarnates in human form to have the experience of being human and having an ego. Christians mistakenly believe that I'm the only one who incarnated as God, the only Son of God. But every single human being is an incarnation of God. You are all sons and daughters of God, engaged in discovering the love at your core and finding your way back home. Love is all there is. There is only God, and God is love. Then, God created a reality in which God could be divorced from love to experience what that would be like. The ego is what makes it possible for God to be lost to love and have any number of experiences that God couldn't have had otherwise. But God also endowed human beings with an internal guidance system so that God couldn't get lost forever, and a fail-safe device that would ensure that God would wake up at some point and remember his, her own divine nature. God is alive in you. Can you feel this? Can you feel God's divine presence within you? It's not so mysterious, really. It is your kindness, compassion, peace, joy, love, wisdom, courage, inner strength, inspiration, brilliance, and adoration of God. That which is seeking God, which loves God, is God itself. And what you are seeking, you already are. You are waking up to this fact. You don't have to become anything. You already are it. You are becoming aware that you are already God. And then the task is to be that in the world as a human being. For this I am a model for you, but I'm not the only one who is a model for love and enlightenment. I have already given you one key for waking up to your divine self, and that is meditation. Another very powerful practice is prayer. Pray for assistance in waking up and living in love. Declare your allegiance to goodness and love, and spiritual forces will come forward to support you in that. These are prayers that will always be answered. On the other hand, the ego's prayers for its desires to be met may or may not be answered, and having them be met may or may not be beneficial. Pray for things that are unquestionably beneficial. Pray for greater love, acceptance, compassion, strength, courage, growth, and the ability to forgive others and let go of the past. Pray to be of greater service to others and for help in fulfilling your life purpose. Pray for these things, and your prayers will always be answered. Those who are guiding humanity are waiting for you to ask for their help in awakening and living in love. Although you aren't completely in control of when and how you awaken to your divine nature, your intention and commitment are important factors in facilitating and hastening your awakening or slowing it down if you lack that intention and commitment. Spiritual forces honor whatever you intend and offer extra assistance only when you show them you're ready to receive it. One of the ways to demonstrate your readiness is to ask them for their help. The specific words you use are not important. What matters is what's in your heart. Spiritual forces respond to your sincere intention, your longing, and your actions, which signal your level of commitment. Praying will help you develop a relationship with God and strengthen your belief in guiding forces. This is important because it opens the door to further benefits from non-physical forces. They do exist, and they exist to help you. The more you realize this, the more you can know that God is good, that the intelligence behind life is good. I like to refer to God as the intelligence behind all life, or the life force within all life, because it helps you to understand that God doesn't exist as a separate entity. As children, most of you were taught that God created man in his own image, so you imagined a God who looks like you. However, what is meant by this is that human beings have God's divine qualities and are inherently good and of love. God is not at all like a human being. By the way, you are not actually human either. You are God playing at being a human being. Human beings are only one form that God takes on. God is an unimaginable force and intelligence, which is perhaps why human beings have needed to see God as something they can relate to, and that's fine. It's fine to talk to God as if God were a good parent, but please understand that this is not actually the case. The trouble with imagining that God is similar to a human being is that God may also be assumed to have the negative propensities of human beings, and nothing could be farther from the truth. For instance, God would never punish what God has created. That would be God punishing himself, herself, and what good could come of that? Punishment is a crude and cruel means of teaching, which imprisons, not elevates. The suffering you experience in life is not punishment for any so-called sins, but something you generate within yourselves by incorrect thinking, by egoic thinking. God is so good and loving that God has given you, himself, herself, a way out of suffering, and that is to see the truth about life. The truth is that the programming you've been given is faulty, and it is the source of your suffering, not anything about life itself. Life is beautiful, wonderful, and although challenging, a precious gift, which your soul has chosen to experience for any number of reasons. The reasons in general are for your growth and evolution, and for returning to love. The suffering of the egoic state of consciousness motivates you to discover how not to suffer, and the answer to that is love. So please, love God and develop a relationship with God and with the helping forces God has put in place for you. They're individuated enough for you to relate to and speak to. By all means, call upon them, and they will guide you on your way home. Thank you for being here. I am with you always.